96 confirmed dead in Maui, but the death toll after the worst wildfire in US history is expected to be much higher. It's understood only 3% of the disaster zone has been searched by rescue teams as frustration grows on the Hawaiian island.
I will tell you this, as a physician, it is a harrowing sight in Maui.
Also this lunchtime, could current cancer waiting time targets in England be scrapped? Labour accuses the government of moving the goalposts, while cancer charities say it is deeply worrying.
With this government, what you've got is targets that they repeatedly fail to hit, and now what they're doing is moving the goalposts, and even where they're keeping targets after this streamlining, their targets they're still not hitting.
Spared jail, the parents of a baby girl who was mauled to death by one of their dogs. England expects fighting talk from the Lionesses as they prepare to take on Australia in their World Cup semi-final. Plus, the teenager lucky to be alive after falling off the Grand Canyon.
I just remember somewhat waking up and being in the back of an ambulance and a helicopter.
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Lucrezia Millarini.
Good afternoon. At least 96 people have died in the devastating wildfires that have destroyed the historic town of Lahaina on Maui, making it the most deadly wildfire in US history. But with 1,000 people still missing, it's feared the death toll is likely to increase significantly. And there is growing frustration on the Hawaiian island after it emerged that only 3% of the worst affected area have been reached by search and rescue teams. With the latest, here's Layla Hayes.
All over here.
Emergency crews continue to search the fire zone on Maui. But the town of Lahaina has now been reduced to ash. And the process of recovering victims isn't easy. These were once people's houses. And this is all that remains of these cars. So far, close to 100 deaths have been confirmed. The state's governor says that number will rise.
It is a harrowing sight in Maui. When those providers, the police and this division, do come across scenes in houses or businesses, is very difficult for them, because they know ultimately they will be sharing with our people that there have been more fatalities.
How could such tragedies be allowed to happen?
At the weekend, residents gathered at church services on the island, some mourning family members they'd lost.
Lost my uncle and his wife and his daughter and his grandson.
You just have to look to the Lord. You just trust in Him. His master plan always worked the best.
The scale of the fire and the intensity of the heat meant some residents had to run into the sea to survive. Many locals say they never received an official warning about the fire until it was too late.
No warning at all. There's not a siren, not a phone alert, nothing.
Thousands have now been left homeless and whole communities have disappeared.
Everything's gone. There's houses that I used to live in Lahaina that I don't even know where they were. And, you know, I lost friends in there. You know, they were going back to get their animals, you know, and she died.
What's happened here is a tragedy, and the reality of what's been left behind is now beginning to be felt. Layla Hayes, ITV News.
Our correspondent Peter Smith is on the island of Maui and sent us this earlier.
This is now the deadliest wildfire in America for well over a century, and the casualties are still being counted. Our team here has been to Lahaina, the epicentre of Maui's wildfires, and we've seen the scale of the damage. We also know that only 3% of the burn zone has been examined by the search teams, and so the number of dead that's been counted so far, it is anticipated that that will rise and go into the hundreds in the days and weeks ahead. We now, as we move in from what was a natural disaster, we're now facing the humanitarian fallout from this. Behind me there's a shelter, the biggest shelter on Maui, that is home to hundreds of people who have been displaced. In total, more than 1,400 people have lost their homes and been displaced so far. Behind me, the donations are coming in here and being collected. These are mostly being given by local people who want to do what they can to help their fellow people who have lost everything in these fires. They've lost their homes, they've lost loved ones, they've lost their livelihoods. There is, though, a degree of anger that the response from the US government has not been enough and not been quick enough so far. We are seeing the National Guard coming in. And the question is, though, is how long is this going to be sustainable? Because with so many people who've lost everything overnight, the question, of course, is what happens next? Where do they go next? And they don't have that reassurance at this point in time. There's also a fear that the damage is not yet over, the danger is not yet over, because there were 3 wildfires still burning here. That's now down to 2. We know that the deadliest wildfire in Lahaina spread because when high winds came in, it knocked over a power cable, and with dry weather after a prolonged period of drought, the fire spread quickly through the dry grass and it reached the houses within minutes, and the emergency response teams didn't have a chance. Well, there are high winds again just now, and with a couple of fires still burning, there are concerns that the danger is not yet over.
Peter Smith there reporting from Maui. Well, it's not just Hawaii where the catastrophic disasters are being felt. Massive floods have swept across India's Himalayan region after intense monsoon rains washing away homes, inundating towns and leaving at least 16 people dead. In Shimla, the landslides brought down a Hindu temple, and authorities said the death toll could rise as they work to pull out those who are still trapped. And searches continue near Turin in Italy after a violent mudslide hit the alpine city of Bardonecchia. Thick grey mud coated the streets with dirt and debris, overwhelming structures, forcing residents to flee. Well, here the cancer targets set by the NHS and the government have routinely been missed, and now in England most of them may well be scrapped altogether and new ones brought in. The NHS has been struggling with COVID backlogs. The plans are only currently being consulted on. The Labour leader accused the government of moving the goalposts. Our political reporter Jasmine Cameron-Chileshi has the details and the reaction.
When Shirley feared her breast cancer had returned during the pandemic, she faced an agonising wait to be seen by doctors and only managed to get a GP appointment after contacting her local MP. She is one of many who has struggled to access prompt cancer care in recent years.
It's the most awful, awful time waiting for that appointment, waiting to hear some news. You know, at the minute we wait 2 weeks for an appointment, but then you wait 2 weeks longer to get results of any tests they might have done. And really, that's long enough.
This week, NHS England plans to scrap some cancer waiting time targets in a bid to improve treatment and catch the disease earlier. Targets set to be scrapped include the 2-week wait between GP referral and specialist appointments and the 2-week wait for breast cancer patients to see a specialist. New targets could see cancer patients given a diagnosis within 28 days, treatment starting within 2 months after referral, and a month after a decision to treat has been made.
Any changes that are made will be those driven by clinical experts in the cancer field and will be done in conjunction with the leading cancer charities. But what we're focused on is outcomes. What is the best way of getting the highest survival rates possible? We're making progress.
But the health service has struggled to meet previous cancer targets. For example, in June, just over half of patients in England had their diagnosis and began treatment within 62 days of an urgent referral. The NHS target is 85%. Labour argues the government has consistently failed patients.
With this government, what you've got is targets that they repeatedly fail to hit. And now what they're doing is moving the goalposts, and even where they're keeping targets after this streamlining, their targets they're still not hitting. So just as we've had on the economy, just as we've had on asylum, we've got complete failure on the government on this front as well.
Health specialists warned that the UK is trailing behind its Western counterparts for cancer survival rates.
We know that for every 4 weeks delay in diagnosis and treatment, you can have an up to 10% increase in death rate. So time is of the essence.
The renewed push to tackle cancer wait times may provide some hope to those desperate for help. But with the NHS facing ongoing strikes and record hospital waiting lists, it's clear the health service faces an uphill battle heading into the winter. Jasmine Cameron-Chileshi, ITV News, Westminster.
The parents of a 3-month-old girl who was mauled to death by the family husky have been spared jail. Kyra King was attacked in March last year while her parents were exercising 19 dogs in the woods in Lincolnshire. Amelia Beckett is at Lincoln Crown Court this lunchtime. Amelia, the judge saying today that this was a tragic case.
Yes, a truly awful incident in which 2 parents have lost their child in what was described today as a tragic conjunction of circumstances. Now, Karen Alcock and Vincent King were both described as experienced dog owners who trained huskies for racing. On the night of the 6th of March last year, they drove 19 of their huskies to an area of woodland called Ostler's Plantation for their regular training session. Their baby Kyra was kept in a pram sleeping nearby. Now, they would train these dogs in 2 teams, swapping them over inside of the van. But on this night, one of the dogs, Blizzard, jumped over the driver's seat and out of a passenger door, which had been kept open. It was then that she attacked Kyra, causing catastrophic injuries to her head and neck. Now, both parents tried to administer CPR, but by the time medics arrived, she was unable to be saved. Now, the judge today said this could not have been foreseen, and when sentencing the pair, she said that this is a tragic case, and I have no doubt you wish every day that you could wind the clock back so that this incident never happened. She sentenced Mr. King to 10 months and Miss Alcock to 8 months, both 2 years suspended, sparing them both jail time. She also granted a destruction order for the dog, Blizzard.
All right, Amelia at Lincoln Crown Court, thank you. Still to come, England are ready to fight. The Lionesses fired up for their World Cup clash against Australia. And the teenager who miraculously survived a 100-foot fall at the Grand Canyon. First, Home Office contractors were told about traces of Legionella bacteria found on the Bibistock home on the same day asylum seekers were moved onto the barge. Dorset councillors said the discovery eventually led to the removal of all 39 people who've been moved onto it. Our political correspondent Shihab Khan is at the Home Office for us this lunchtime. And Shihab, a lot of finger-pointing going on here.
Yeah, there's a lot of different groups involved, which is why there's a bit of a blame game going on. The Legionella bacteria doesn't necessarily mean there's a risk to public health, but it can cause an infection, which is why there's so much concern here. Now, it was on the 7th of August that Dorset Council say they got test results back, which suggested there were traces of it on board BB Stockholm. And it was at that point they told the contractors, which they say it was their responsibility to inform the Home Office, to inform the department itself. It was the next day the Dorset Council then had a meeting with the contractors, and they say they verbally informed a Home Office official at that point too. But it's not 2 days until 2 days after that that ministers become aware, and the government's looking into why it's taken that long for that to happen. They do say, however, the ministers acted very, very quickly, that by the next day people were evacuated off BB Stockholm in what was a precautionary move. But the concern here is, although there's no risk to public health and ministers are saying that so far there's been no harm at all, we are waiting to see if anyone develops symptoms.
Shihab, thank you. 2 people remain in a serious condition after a car crashed into a busy family campsite in Pembrokeshire, hitting a tent with a baby inside. The car is believed to have lost control and veered off a road and into the site yesterday. Well, Dean Thomas Welsh is there for us this lunchtime. Dean, what's the latest on the investigation?
Yes, well, police are continuing to investigate what caused the car to leave this road just 10 yards from where I am now and enter this campsite in Newgale. On Saturday night, Newgale campsite would have been filled with families enjoying a seaside break for the school holidays. But at 10:30, what they witnessed was a chaotic and terrifying scene as a car ploughed through occupied tents. Now, many of the people staying here were the first on the scene. They would have been the ones that would have lifted the car off the injured people and managed to get people out of their tents. Now, 9 people were injured in the incident. 3 are being treated in hospital. We know at least 1 person has serious life-changing injuries. Now, one of these tents that was hit by the car had a sleeping baby inside, and the baby only avoided serious injury due to the cot that it was sleeping in. Now, many of the people still here witnessed what happened on Saturday night. There's a real feeling of shock within this campsite, but the overriding feeling is this incident could have been a lot worse, and for now it seems a major tragedy has been avoided.
OK, Dean in Pembrokeshire, thank you. B&Q has apologised after 2 books titled White Supremacy were included in a product picture on its website. The book was spotted alongside flowers and a picture frame in the background of a radiator cover product. The retailer has removed the product and all images associated with it from the website. Network Rail has released these astonishing images of people dicing with potentially deadly danger at level crossings. These pictures, filmed in the Midlands, show dog walkers posing for photos on the track with their pets and primary school boys preparing to cross on a scooter just before a train speeds through 7 seconds later. And bidders who want to buy Wilko have been given until Wednesday to make an offer to buy the company. The chain went to administration last week, putting the future of its 400 stores and 12,500 workers in doubt. To the World Cup now and England. Kira Walsh was in fighting talk mode today, saying the team are ready to fight Australia in their semi-final clash. Australia are, of course, on home ground and will have thousands of home supporters rooting for them. Well, our sports editor, Steve Scott, reports from Australia.
They're still not fully firing, but if you've won 5 out of 5 and reached a World Cup semi-final, then you must be doing something right. Standing in their way now, Australia, the hosts, and the oldest of enemies.
For us, I wouldn't say we're thinking about spoiling the party. I think it's just another game, and a massive game at that. So, yeah, for us, it's just fully focused on trying to reach a World Cup final, regardless of who we're playing. But, yeah, I think obviously with the support from Australia, I think it is going to be a little bit different for them.
And this is the one that they were really wanted.
The rivalry crosses many sports, from netball, Australia beat England to become world champions earlier this month, to cricket. The recent Test series was drawn, although Australia retained the Ashes, and rugby.
Johnny Wilkinson, he's got it!
Wednesday's venue is where Johnny Wilkinson steered England to their World Cup triumph over Australia in 2003. The Matildas made it through to face England after a thrilling but physically and emotionally exhausting shootout against France. Every step of Australia's journey through this tournament has been devoured by fans right across the country. Television viewing figures for the quarter-final win against France were the highest since the Sydney Olympics 23 years ago. And politicians are even dangling the prospect of a public holiday if the Matildas become world champions.
To be as dramatic as it was incredible. Yeah. And you're right, it brought the nation together.
The team's success is the top story here on every TV news network. Wherever they are, Australians will find a way to watch. And even kick-off times for other major sporting fixtures have been moved on Wednesday, so everyone can get to see the game. What makes this matchup even more mouthwatering is that Australia are the only side to have beaten a Serena Wiegmann England team.
That was a friendly game, and yes, we do take something out of it. But at the same time, we're into knockout games in a World Cup, so it's a completely different game, and I think we won't sort of let the result of that last game that we played them sort of get in the way.
The Lionesses are in their 3rd successive World Cup semi-final. They lost the previous 2. If they're going to break that hoodoo, they'll have to do it in the face of an entire country willing them to fail. Steve Scott, ITV News, Sydney.
What a match it's going to be. Now, for your musicians, there's no pressure like parents watching from the front row. But for Beatle, the late George Harrison, it wasn't his performance his mother was critical of. In a letter put up for auction, Louise Harrison said she was disgusted at how fans screamed through a Beatles concert. She was replying to a fan's letter about her experience at a gig in Manchester in 1963. The letters are being auctioned later this month. And finally, it is a tale that many would not have survived to tell. A 13-year-old boy who slipped and fell nearly 100 feet from a ledge off the Grand Canyon in America has been pulled to safety after a huge rescue effort by dozens of emergency workers. Wyatt Kaufman's injuries were extensive, including a collapsed lung and ruptured spleen. Remarkably, though, he's already been discharged from hospital. Daniel Henry has his story.
Nearly 5 million people visit the Grand Canyon every year. But most don't leave with souvenirs like this, because most people wouldn't survive a fall like Wyatt's.
I just remember somewhat waking up and being in the back of an ambulance and a helicopter, and then the plane to here.
He was visiting one of the world's most famous sites with his family, but he lost his footing while making space for others to take photos.
I was squatting down and hanging on to it. I only had one hand on it, so it wasn't that good of grip, and it was kind of pushing me back, and I lost my grip and I started to fall back.
Wyatt fell almost 100 feet. Rescue teams took 2 hours to reach him by rope before airlifting the 13-year-old to a Las Vegas hospital. Doctors found that Wyatt had suffered 9 broken vertebrae, a ruptured spleen, a collapsed lung, concussion, and a broken hand, and a dislocated finger. It might not sound like it, but Wyatt is one of the lucky ones.
Given the distance he fell, it's not uncommon for people to fall an equivalent distance and be either unconscious and unable to respond or deceased.
2 to 3 people die from falls at the Grand Canyon every year. Not to mention close calls like this one. The National Park Service say visitors should always keep a safe distance of at least 6 feet from the edge of the rim. Wyatt and his family won't need reminding. Daniel Henry, ITV News.
A lucky escape indeed, and that is it for now. The evening news is at 6:30, but from everyone on the Lunchtime team, bye-bye.